Right, well, Bonedigion, Bonedigesai, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ceredigion Hustings for our Senedd candidate for the Senedd elections next year. I'm delighted that we have our two applicants, Leena Farhat and Cadan Tomos, here. They're going to speak to us for up to 5 minutes, and thereafter we have an array of questions that we're going to put to them. A range of different topics that have been submitted by different people. In the good spirit of hustings, we've tossed a coin, and Cadan is going to speak first. So Cadan Thomas has up to 5 minutes to talk to us, the members of the Ceredigion local party. So over to Cadan. Okay, Cadan.
Diolch yn fawr, Mark. And if you're watching this and taking part in this process, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi hefyd. I can only hope that I'll get to see you in person very soon. This is a very strange way to be conducting these hustings, but one that's indicative of the very strange times we're living in. COVID-19 has had a massive impact on our daily lives in ways we couldn't have dared imagine even months ago. For many people, it's been difficult and inconvenient, stuck at home for days on end, going without seeing loved ones for long periods, getting used to wearing face masks and keeping a distance from others. For other people, COVID-19 can only be described as a worst nightmare. Workers who will never come back off furlough, businesses who won't reopen their doors, families who will never get to see a loved one again. There's no doubt that the coronavirus will fundamentally change the face of our county. Combine that with the looming threat of a no-deal Brexit and the ever-growing emergency of climate change and flooding, and it could absolutely devastate our communities as we know them, if we let it happen. But we don't have to let it happen. We can fight for a different future, one that recognises the best that Ceredigion has to offer, that is fair for everyone who wants to live, work and relax here, where all our communities, from the biggest towns to the smallest hamlets, can thrive. I'm standing to be your Senedd candidate because I care about the future of our county. Now, I know times have been tough for our party too in recent years. Ceredigion members know that all too well. But I wouldn't be standing if I didn't think that we could win here again. I see 3 key steps on our way to winning. Firstly, as your candidate, I want to lead a conversation across Ceredigion about how we build a better future for our communities. We need to borrow the very best ideas wherever they're from and shape them into a vision for how we build back better in Ceredigion. Secondly, I'll work to find Welsh Lib Dem champions in as many communities across our county as possible, who can fly our flag and hopefully eventually become councillors. Our fight must be one for the whole of Ceredigion, which means our team must reflect the whole of Ceredigion too. Thirdly, I'll help make our local party the fighting force Ceredigion needs us to be. That means using my experience to make sure we run campaigns that matter in the most effective way possible to improve the lives of people in our county. The road to victory is long, but it's one that we have to travel because this is a pivotal moment for Ceredigion. Now, they say that home is where the heart is. Well, Ceredigion has always been where my heart is. My family has lived here for, I'm told, 7 generations. I myself grew up in Aberaeron, in Llannon and Aberystwyth. I went to primary school in Aberaeron and Ysgol Gymraeg, and then on to Ysgol Gyfun Penweddig. I've been shaped by the cultural fabric of this county as a young scout leader, as a viola player and a singer in Ceredigion's valued music service, and competing in a Eisteddfodau with my schools. All of these opportunities have helped make me who I am today. I also grew up seeing firsthand the importance of public service. My Taki has been a member of Aberaeron Town Council since he was younger than I am now. He's proudly worn the town's mayoral chain for 3 terms. For him, public service has never been about the glory. It's always been about the community, the town, the people. He loves the people. It's not unusual for him to take an hour to pop to the shops and back because he loves to stop and chat with so many of his neighbours. As a child who just wanted an ice cream from the Hive, it was pretty annoying. But now I get it. Anyone who knows him can tell he cares about Aberaeron and he just wants to do his bit to make it the best place it can be for every resident. I'm not sure I quite realised this growing up, but as I've become more involved in public life, I've realised that that's exactly the sort of role I want to play. Shirley Williams was absolutely right when she said that politics is for people. Otherwise, what are we all doing here? My politics, our politics, must be for the people of Ceredigion too. So that's me, a local boy from Ceredigion who wants to fight for Ceredigion. If you choose me as your Senedd candidate, I'll put my all into the fight to turn our county yellow again on that map. And as your Senedd member, I'll devote every day to fighting for a better, more liberal future for Ceredigion and its people. Diolch yn fawr.
And welcome back, Leena, from the waiting room. It's your 5 minutes now, so over to Leena Farhat.
Thank you all for listening to this hustings and listening to the both of us. I hope it will be a rewarding outcome either way. And I wanted to start off by just mentioning that we all have one thing in common, I think, and that is that we are amazingly lucky to call this area, Ceredigion, our home. In recent years, Ceredigion has become one of the fastest growing counties in Wales, and it's really no wonder as to why. We have a proud history of being Mid and West Wales's educational hub, with award-winning research that is helping advance not only people's lives in Wales, but across the world in a variety of fields. We're home to a bustling tourism industry, as well as work that is of agricultural wonder. All of these things have, and so much more, have economic and social needs and implications that I and so many others believe are just not being met, with uncertainty around so many political affairs, from Brexit to what's happening now with COVID-19 and our global pandemic. More and more issues are being raised, but that's not to say there were not issues before that could have been bettered. We have had a Senedd for 20 years now, and we have been sending a representative there. And I believe that we can do better and that we deserve better here in Ceredigion. We deserve a strong representative to send down to Cardiff Bay, not only to ensure that our voice is heard, but to make sure that true and meaningful change is achieved. As a Welsh Liberal Democrat Party, people think here that we're on the back foot, and I know that because I've talked to people from Aberteifi to Llambed to Tregaron to Aberystwyth and even to Borth. And I think that is especially in light of what's happened in recent years. But I have hope for our Senedd elections, and I have hope for our local party. But make no mistake, we will be taking on an entitled establishment who are failing our area in a number of ways, who think that educational opportunities for our young people are just an afterthought, and who think that care institutions can be closed, forcing people to be uprooted as if they're a mere inconvenience here in Ceredigion. And I have made Ceredigion my home, and I'll not stand for this or any sorts of decisions that would harm our communities. Bydd bod amser yn falch o gwaith yma yn Ceredigion. We have a proud Liberal history, and we need to make sure we have an even brighter Liberal future. We need to work to be an open and tolerant Ceredigion that does right by the people who live here. I've lived experience here in Ceredigion, working across the constituency with a range of people, and I'm someone who has worked to get where she is, and so know the value of hard work, as well as can maximise opportunities around me to get that best outcome for myself and everyone around me. And when I set my mind to something, I will, more often than not, achieve it. I am and will always be the radical alternative, who will fight tooth and nail for every single constituent, every single member, and anyone who I can and have the privilege to represent. We're in hard times right now, but I really want to be able to offer hope and a brighter future and a fresh start for the Welsh Liberal Democrats here in Ceredigion. So my future is now in your hands, and I would like to make a case to you through the questions that you'll ask tonight and through anything that you may see of me, whether that is in public or private forums, to give myself a chance, as I think that I can really offer an alternative here in Ceredigion and a fresh start for our local party and for our local people. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, both our applicants. We now move to the questions. Before that, I should introduce a familiar, be familiar to many of you. To others, if not, Barry Long, our returning officer, who is here to ensure fair play and to adjudicate as necessary. But I'm chairing the questions, but Barry's there to make sure that all this is done within the proper regulations of our party. Okay, we're going to start with Leena answering the first question. There's a little bit of a preamble to this one, but here off we go. As you are aware, for a good number of years, we have been battling with Plaid Cymru to represent this constituency in the Senedd. What do you feel you bring in terms of campaigning experience and the ability to attract sufficient support to mount a serious and dynamic campaign to win Ceredigion for the Welsh Liberal Democrats? That's Leena to start.
Thank you. It's a very loaded question, but I'm very happy it came up. So yes, obviously I am aware of our ongoing battle to, shall I say, take the constituency off Plaid Cymru's hands in the Senedd. That is an ongoing battle, if you will. I think that what I can bring to the candidature is that I have a strong ability to work cross-party, firstly and foremostly, because we have to be taking votes off other parties. Not to sound like the stereotype, but it is very much a two-horse race here in Ceredigion when it comes to the Senedd, and I still truly believe that. However, what we need to do is ensure that we are squeezing vote share out of other parties, and that is both, well, we will have to make a decision campaign-wise, whether that be Labour, whether that's the Tories, whether that's trying to get floating voters to come over to us. But that's something that I think would be up to a campaign team, possibly my campaign team if I am selected, to ensure that. And that I think is best done by listening to what people out on the streets of Ceredigion are talking about. And I can bring that listening ear, but also have my own input as to what I think is best just from being here and having my lived experience and staying in the constituency. The other piece of campaign experience that I can bring is knowing the constituency extremely well. I have been lucky enough and made time to make sure that I know the constituency both geographically and socially. And that's something that I can definitely bring as campaign experience, just that sort of more local feel, but also I know what it's like to be an outsider with the, in the constituency, and so could probably bring some different types of activists on board that way. So I think those are my two main things I could bring for that question.
Impeccable timing for those 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Cadan.
Thanks, Mark. So in terms of running a good campaign, I've got a wealth of experience in doing that. I actually started off my campaigning life in Ceredigion. I spent a summer as the constituency organiser when we were between members of staff, and have sort of gone on there to help get Liberal Democrats elected up and down the country in various tiers of government, including I was part of the winning campaign team for the Brecon and Radnorshire by-election last summer. And I think, as a result of my career, both as a volunteer in the party, but also professionally, starting off in the party, working in the assembly, and then going on into the third sector, I've developed a really strong ability to get noticed in the media. Is something that I've used to great lengths both in my professional life, but also politically. When I was, Mark, one of your spokespeople when you were leader of the party, I got more media coverage than any other spokesperson, despite the fact that I wasn't elected to public office at the time. But also the experiences that I've had outside of politics, that I've deliberately chosen to work for causes that I believe are important, that actually make a difference to people's lives. My current job is with an older people's housing charity that is actively making lives better and easier for older people right across Wales. I think also the other point I'd make is in terms of who I am. I think looking at me, my background, with the schools I went to, my name, most people would expect me to be a member of Plaid, and my values obviously dictate that I'm not. I'm a liberal, I'm not a nationalist, but I think I can challenge some of that sort of assumed wisdom, if you like, that all Welsh speakers and all people with AP in their name and from my sort of background are Plaid voters, and I'm living proof that you don't have to be. And I think that ability and that living proof will help, I think, in the battle against Plaid in the next election.
Great, thank you, Giacomo. Cadan, you're going to answer this one first. Ceredigion is mainly a rural area, and agriculture is a huge part of our county's economy. And agriculture, of course, is having its fair share of problems at the moment with the TB crisis and uncertainty in the price we get for our produce. Are you both prepared to be a strong voice in Cardiff to help and support this vital industry? Could you give examples of where you think the main priorities are for the industry in Ceredigion and how you would address them? Cadan and Leena.
Yes, absolutely. I am, as my friends, more rurally minded friends would very much remind me at school, I am a townie. I have not worked on a farm before, but I know absolutely quite how vital farming and agricultural industries are to the economy here in Ceredigion. And and the questioner is right in saying that there is so much uncertainty and so many challenges facing the sector right now. COVID actually being one of them, and the massive disruptions that there were to the food supply chain. I absolutely want to make sure that I am a strong voice for the farming sector, that I get to know and understand the farming unions, the members and their needs and concerns if I am not only selected but also hopefully elected in the future too. I think a lot of the challenges that are facing the sector, a lot of them stem from Brexit and sort of the immediate cliff edge threat that is no deal. Immediately shutting off that marketplace that is Europe, that a lot of our produce goes to, is a massive concern. And averting the no deal firstly, but also making sure that we protect standards in the future, ensuring that the market isn't flooded by cheaper, less standard assured produce from overseas is vital. But I think also the sort of climate change and the climate emergency is something that agriculture is going to have to get to grips with as well. And I'm glad that the NFU, for example, has started to recognise the role that farmers have to play in combating climate change. As land managers, there is a unique opportunity there for farmers to be making their case and making their contribution to fighting climate change. And I'm really keen to make sure that Ceredigion is at the forefront of that fight, using the expertise from Aberystwyth University to be developing new technologies, new innovative practices that can help make sure that we're at the forefront of the climate change fight.
Thank you. Okay, over to Leena.
Yes, I'm very aware of both those things. I come from an agricultural background myself, with growing up having my dad being a bovine farmer. So I am very acutely aware of the impact of TB and what has led in the past, especially in Wales, to have to slaughter our own livestock over it. Now, I think in terms of the question for agricultural issues, I think is quite vast. And I think that we need to spend more time here in Ceredigion looking at investing in our farming population. And that is not necessarily just monetary, but it's also the time and also looking at how we can best serve from an education, from a health perspective, and sort of more holistic way that we approach our agricultural community. Now, I've spent a lot of time talking to younger farmers, more elderly farmers, as to what they think would be useful, and that is something that I would love to be able to bring to being a candidate here in Ceredigion, is to be able to go down to Cardiff and actually fight for a more holistic approach to farming policy, whether that's improving mental health infrastructure, whether that's helping farmers diversify where they want to into projects such as housing, such as climate change, a way to combat climate change, also looking at how we can best produce energy in our constituency, and farmers have a big role to play in that. But also, yes, the uncertainties of Brexit and even COVID-19 with how we are staffing our farms and what we can do from a technology perspective. We've got some amazing businesses here set up in Ceredigion, not just by Aberystwyth University, but places like Ajaccio, who are pioneering in agricultural technology. So yes, I want to see someone from our party sent down to Cardiff Bay to not only fight for farmers, but to fight for the entire agricultural industry, and what we can do to best optimize the work that we do here in Ceredigion.
Great, brilliant, thank you. You will notice as my hand rises, that means you're about 2 minutes. We're not being too strict, but you've got the hint, so thank you very much. Okay, Leena, to start this next one. Tourism. Tourism is an important part of the economy here. I should say particularly here in Borth, but more generally too. In the 1970s, much of Uplands Ceredigion was designated as a national park. But the Tory government of the day decided not to confirm that designation, so it never was enacted. Would such a designation, in your view, be helpful now? That's Leena.
Thanks. I think that in the case of, well, the Uplands question, if you will, here in Ceredigion, I think that it could be of great help, but I would approach the question with caution and would like to know what the local community would think. Obviously, there would be economic impacts as well as social impacts on the local community. And I think that, as in most things, as Liberals, it is always best to ensure that power is put closest to the people. And I would want to see that the local community has a voice in that. But it's not just Uplands. I think that we have areas of natural interest and places that have been very close to becoming natural parks, in other places in Ceredigion. And I think that, again, we need to start asking those questions, but we need to move forward in a sustainable way with all of those places. So I think that cautiously, I would say yes. My heart would say yes. I'm always up for conserving our land and always up for doing what's best by our area. But again, I would want to know what local people think, because at the end of the day, they will be impacted and they will have to live with that choice. Okay,
diolch yn fawr. Cadan.
It's a very interesting question. It's not one that I expected to have tonight, but thank you for whoever submitted it. Would a national park be helpful? Well, yes and no, I guess, and it depends on which way you're looking at it. Obviously, from the perspective of residents, living in a national park can cause all sorts of issues in terms of heightened planning controls being one main example. Some would say that that's one of the points of the national park, but I think national parks as they are at the moment are quite sort of unwieldy, large beasts that actually the residents within them don't really have much of a say on how planning policy is even set. For example, there's no directly elected democratic voice onto a national park, which I know we as a party believe in, has been in various manifestos, is to have directly elected people on national park boards. So I don't think I would want to see that until we got to a point where national parks were better organisations and better structured. I think I'm not entirely sure whether or not it is the best way. I do think, however, there are a lot more opportunities for improving and encouraging tourism sustainably in northern Ceredigion. Ceredigion is not just about its seafronts and its beaches. There's so much diversity of wildlife, of scenery, and of vegetation in various parts of Ceredigion too. And I think opportunities to use that to our advantage, but in a sustainable way, making sure that the communities reap the benefits of that tourism too, I think it should absolutely be explored. Is doing it through a national park the best way to do it? I'm yet to be convinced, but I'm willing to be.
Well, thank you. Cadan, to answer the next one first. Ceredigion, or perhaps I should say in good Geraint Howell style, Cardiganshire, has a long tradition of liberalism. What do you understand by the word liberalism?
Liberalism. I'll resist the temptation to get my membership card out of my wallet and read the preamble off the back. But so liberalism for me, it's about opportunity. It's about giving every single person the opportunity that they need to make of their lives what they wish. and recognizing that some people, because of their backgrounds, because of where they're from, because of what they look like, need extra help to have the same fair crack of the whip, as it were, that other people get much more easily by virtue of their background. And you know, that's the thing that sets us apart. I think we as a party have been quite poor at defining our liberalism in recent years, and as a consequence, I don't think the general public really have an understanding of what liberalism is, let alone what we as Liberal Democrats stand for. And I think it's important, and it's something that I definitely would want to do as the candidate here in Ceredigion, is ensure that everything that we do is seeped in that principle of liberalism, and that not only by doing it, but explaining as we do, we are doing this because we believe in it, because of our values, because of our ideology. And it's only through developing and fostering that understanding among the wider population that we're ever going to get to a point that we have a core vote, people who have that affinity with us and call themselves liberals, call themselves Liberal Democrats, and will vote for us election in, election out. So it's not something that you can solve overnight, obviously, but it's something that we all need to be working on day in, day out, and everything that we do whilst wearing that badge that is the bird of liberty, because the future of our party depends on it.
Giacomo, Leena?
Really good question. I think that at its core, liberalism is a two-way street. It's about a government with the consent of the governed, but also ensuring that any government that is put in, values equality first and foremost. I also think that liberalism is, again, at its base, advocating and dependent on the idea of merit and getting by merit. I like to think that as a liberal, as a liberal party, but as a liberal myself, we need to work on not just giving handouts necessarily, and not treating people, with that sort of attitude, but rather giving people a hand up and showing people that there are so many opportunities that can be used and that we can tap into, but it's sometimes about pointing people in the right direction. And as liberals, we do that on a massive scale, and that's something that I would like to see here in Ceredigion. We have so much infrastructure, but people seldom know where to find it and seldom know how it works. And that's what I would love to be able to bring, if I was the candidate here in Ceredigion, is to make sure that every single person knows what decisions can lead them to the outcome that they desire. And I think that is a very important way of looking at liberalism. And the last sort of fold that I would say is within liberalism is being unafraid to challenge any establishment or any norm. I think that we in Ceredigion have a long history of doing that. And that is something that I would want to see once again pushed to the forefront.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Leena, to answer the next one. Inevitably, as a candidate, you will be faced with radio and TV interviews. If you were asked in one of those radio or TV interviews a very simple question, but a profound one, what is the biggest issue facing Ceredigion now? What would your reply be? Leena.
The biggest issue I find to be facing Ceredigion now is that we are out of sight and out of mind, and we have been for nearly 20 years. And that is the root of most of our issues, is that we do not have a strong enough voice. We do not have someone who represents our interests. It can be about the NHS, it can be about agriculture, it can be about the future of education, anything. But we don't have a strong enough voice. We are not represented correctly. And that is our biggest issue. And I'm out to fix that.
Okay, thank you very much. Cadan.
Thank you. I think when you pare everything back, there are so many things that you can talk about, but when you pare everything back to the one crux root issue, it's the economy. I'm one of the many symptoms of the fact that the Ceredigon's economy is struggling is the brain drain. You know, I'm what I guess what you could call a victim of that myself. Is that, you know, many young people like me can't afford to, or can't find the opportunity to make their home, grow their family in Ceredigion, because there aren't the chances there aren't the well-paid jobs, there aren't the affordable houses to do it. And you know, I think I looked back at my sixth form yearbook the other day, and I counted and found that only about a third of the people that I went to sixth form with are still living and working in Ceredigion. The rest have gone either to elsewhere in Wales like me, or further afield. And when you've got so many of young Ceredigion's young people, so much of Ceredigion's talent leaving the county because they can't find jobs that in their chosen vocations within the county, then poses huge, massive issues for the future sustainability of our communities across the county. And so that is one of the things that massively has to be tackled, is how do we actually build sustainable communities? And the answers to that comes from, yes, investment, but making sure that investment is not just money chucked at Ceredigion to sort of shut us up and satisfy it, but actually is thought out. There's a strategy behind it. It's targeted investment to grow the sectors of the economy that Ceredigion is good at. It's our agriculture, it's our publishing, it's our academic expertise as well. It's making sure that the infrastructure is there, both in terms of transport and vital things like broadband is there to create the conditions for the economy to grow. And without solving those, then there is a massive threat for Ceredigion's future of an ageing population that is very hard to see how we would solve otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Cadan. Cadan, to answer first. 3 more questions. We're going to get through the lot. What is your view on the proposal? It was the suggestion, the question, but actually it is a firm proposal. What is your view of the proposal to reopen the Aberystwyth to Carmarthen rail line, not least given that some of the previous track of the old rail line has been built on?
Well, so I think clearly, I can stand here and quite easily say that it's a rail line that should never have been closed. I really think that some form of rail link between Aberystwyth and Carmarthen is absolutely vital for Ceredigion's future prosperity, making sure that our rural communities have access to the infrastructure that they need in order to thrive into the future. I read through the feasibility study that I'm glad the hard work of campaigners managed to secure out of the Welsh Government. And there are some challenges, not least the marshland around Tregaron. There are also, as the questioner says, there are parts of the track that have been built on. There's the Heritage Railway as well that needs to find a new home. But I can't help but think that if this were a more urban area, and as we're seeing in many other parts of Wales, the investment would be poured in. There wouldn't be much of a question asked. In fact, sort of around the corner from where I'm currently living in Cardiff at the moment, there's a new station being put in on the metro. But I can't quite see why we need one, because sort of within easy walking distance, there are many other stations that will get you to exactly where you want to go anyway. So I think the issue there is that we need someone who's actually going to stand up and fight and urge for that investment. I think it's more than Ceredigion deserves. It's actually what Ceredigion needs for the future. And if any government that's governing Wales is serious about making sure that people can actually live well in rural areas, then this is exactly the sort of investment that needs to happen. Okay, thank you. Leena.
Thanks. So weirdly, next week will mark the anniversary of the report itself from the for the Aberystwyth to Carmarthen rail investment line, and I can sit here and tell you that I would love for it to be reinstated. I can put myself very comfortable in saying that I don't understand why it was closed. If we are serious about ensuring connectivity across rural communities, not least in mid Wales, but across Wales, we need to look at reopening it. The current link does nothing for our economic sustainability, viability, or even, you know, promoting better climate implications. If anything, it just forces more people to you know, commute by car or in you know, just wildly unsustainable ways. It is also forcing people to move out of the area because of the lack of connectivity, because yes, it connected Aberystwyth and Carmarthen, but there were lots of stops along the way that helped connect smaller rural communities to both of those focal points and with, you know, amongst each other. I think that that is worth mentioning. So yes, I would love to see it reopened. And I think that if we are serious about looking at a more connected Wales, especially with, you know, the semi-new takeover with Transport for Wales, and they are serious about having a West Wales that works for all of Wales, we need to look seriously at not just campaigning on it, but actually fulfilling what, you know, what that report actually said.
Well, thank you. Leena to ask first. Now, in the House of Commons, I should say that you have the luxury on your first speech, your maiden speech, of choosing what you talk about. If elected to the Senedd and you had the luxury of choosing, what particular area of policy would you like to cover in your first speech to the Senedd? Leena and Cadan.
If I had the choice, I would love to. I would talk about about building a Ceredigion that is environmentally and economically sustainable. Now, that sounds like two policy areas, but I strongly believe the two are interlinked, and that I actually can't distill the two separately. I think that if a Liberal Democrat was elected to represent Ceredigion in the Senedd, they would be someone who is progressive and have that wholehearted and holistic approach to policy. So those two things are not disconnectable for me, and that's what my maiden speech would cover, as well as subtopics on looking at, you know, economic and environmental sustainability in our tourism industry, agricultural industry, as well as the way that we look at it through educational lenses and more academic approaches to that field.
Great, thank you very much. Cadan.
Yeah, I don't think the Senedd has that luxury of that long winding speech where you get to gracefully thank your predecessor and wax lyrical about them and the constituency. But I think, you know, if I was in that scenario, I think it would come back to the economy and infrastructure for me, and, you know, making sure that, you know, someone was there, me, making the case for the Ceredigion to have its fair share that has been denied it for far too long, and, you know, raising the issue finally and ensuring that we have a real discussion about what makes a sustainable rural community, what conditions do we need to put in place to allow them to thrive, what investment needs to happen, what strategic thinking needs to happen to make sure that rural communities, towns and villages in places like Ceredigion have that ability to thrive and grow into the future. And it comes down to stuff like, you know, sustainable transport infrastructure. It comes down to ensuring that, you know, communities like ours can reap the benefit of the tourism that it attracts, which, you know, we've seen so many visitors coming over the course of the coronavirus period. Other than sort of the revenue into the businesses themselves, you know, it's sometimes hard to see how much of a wider benefit comes into the county because of that. And you know, because that so much of that is vital, so much of that underpins, you know, the crucial nature of Ceredigion's future is that is absolutely where I'd have to start.
Well, thank you. You'll be relieved. Perhaps you won't. Perhaps you want to go on for another hour, but you'll be relieved to know it's the last question. So Cadan's going to answer first, then Leena. It's more of an organisational one, I guess. So there's a principle for our party to reflect on. Given that we need to campaign across the whole of Wales to gain regional seats in the Senedd, do you think we should be asking members of our party in adjoining constituencies to come and join our campaign, your campaign, to win Ceredigion? Cadan and Leena.
If we're in a position to be able to win Ceredigion, absolutely. And it's something that I would absolutely want to make sure that I'm, from the start, building the relationships with activists in neighbouring constituencies so that they're not necessarily forced to come into Ceredigion, but actually they might want to come into Ceredigion and hopefully get me elected. Like the carrot is always much sweeter than the stick in these sorts of things, I always find. But I think crucially, the way to getting to the position where Ceredigion is winnable and that we're in a position to be hopefully attracting activists into our seat is that we need to start the work now. Ideally, we needed to start the work months ago in order to campaign to get us back onto a footing where we can seriously target the seats here in Ceredigion. I absolutely want to do that from the get-go. If it doesn't happen this time round, I'm well up for making sure that we use the 5 years in between the elections to make sure it happens next time. But I don't think that we should be planning for or depending on activists from outside in order to make our victory successful. Plaid Cymru have held constituencies in most sides of Ceredigion, and in many cases they don't depend on that sort of that busing in at election time. If we're going to build a really winning team, we shouldn't have to depend on that either. But absolutely, I would very much want them to come.
Thank you. Leena.
Yeah, if we are in a situation to where we could win, I think that yes, it is appropriate to ask activists from neighbouring constituencies to come in, but I don't feel that that necessarily drawing them away from the regional campaign is always the best use of neither our time or the overall Welsh Liberal Democrat campaign. And I think that is something that we'll have to see close to the election. But campaigning here in Ceredigion never stops. It never has. If you are here full time, you're always talking to people and picking people's brains. We are a very political part of the world, and that is something that I love. I love how engaged people are in either local politics or even what's happening in the Senedd, Westminster, or even on a European scale. So that campaigning has already started. For so many people, because people are starting to ask those questions about what's happening at a local, regional and national level. But in terms of building a team here in Ceredigion, I hope that myself, if I am the candidate, or whoever the candidate might be, has the capacity to inspire our activists here in Ceredigion to be able to get them out the door and helping out. But we have to keep good relations with our neighbouring activists, because at the end of the day we are all in one party and fighting for the same cause really here in Mid and West Wales.
Thank you, Leena. Thank you, Cadan. I deeply regret in a way that we've had to hold this meeting in the way that we have. I would have much rather been chairing a session with Barry on the top table and my timekeeper in a hall somewhere in this great county. That was not to be. And I should say it's rainy and dark in Borth now. I can hear the rain beating down. But thank you both. Genuinely, thank you both on behalf of local party members. Whatever members decide, you've both, I think, you certainly cheered and enthused me by your contributions and your responses to those diverse questions. And I wish you both the genuine best of luck in what will transpire in a few weeks' time. But rest assured, I want to assure both of you that there are determined Liberals out there across this county, people who helped me in the past and who will be helping one of you in your Senedd campaign in this great county. Thank you all very, very much indeed for tuning in to this hustings. And if you were here in person, I'd say give our two applicants a big round of applause, because they are both deserving of that. Thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Barry Long, our returning officer as well. And thank you those responsible for this technology that even a Luddite like me has now started to master. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mark.